Players in Africa's real estate industry gathered in Lagos, Nigeria, to discuss how the built environment can embrace the sustainable culture and align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Focus On. I'm Akin Obakeye. On this edition, we mirror how these stakeholders at the Unite Summit plan to reduce the 40% global carbon emissions. This year's edition tries to identify global challenges and issues relating to sustainability and explore strategies of incorporating SDG and ESG in investment decisions.
If you look at the real estate sector, as I said, it consumes a lot of resources, also generates a lot of effluent, a lot of waste. Not only does it consume a lot of resources, but it also generates a lot of waste. Okay? So you have a double whammy. How do you deal with this?
I believe the most successful institutions over the next 10 years will be those that know how to resolve the conflict between the three Ps: people, profit, and planet.
The built industry in Africa is believed to contribute up to 40% of all carbon emissions globally. These stakeholders who make up the ESG community are here to galvanize strategies to create a healthier, safer, and cleaner planet. The Unite Summit sees leaders from the real estate, government, finance, business, technology, venture, and academia highlight key issues in details and how best Africa can build green.
This 10th edition of the summit is not just a great milestone for the team. It also presents us with the opportunity to raise the visibility and impact of global initiatives, which is a focus on local and innovative actions and solutions that can lead to transformative and sustainable change in the built environment. The focus areas of discussions and dialogue are built around the target of achieving a more sustainable environment.
People in Lagos or people in Nigeria don't see sustainability as something too distant away from them. Issues of climate change are too distant away from them. As you well know, it's a very simple thing, because if you don't speak the language that people understand, don't weave sustainability issues and policies around the problem that is known to everyone, they are not likely to take it very, very seriously. I give you a quick example. When I joined a team from Switzerland, we went to Kenya at the very onset of these issues of sustainability. And we wanted people to desist from felling trees, which they use for their roofs. So, having listened to us patiently, this man, about 70 years old, he took us to his courtyard. He showed us. He said, "You see this hole here?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You know that rat, lion, snake can come in here and attack my family?" He said, "Yes." He said, "So, if I was to close any hole at all in my life, which one should I close first? This one that is here, or the one that is in Antarctica that you point to that I don't even know?" And that is instrumental and very relevant to what you just said now. If you don't tie this issue around, how many people now have to travel long distances to fetch water, to fetch firewood, or to walk to farms? All the kind of little animals people live off the forest. Look at the distance we are now having to travel as a result of this. So it's fundamentally important that we wrap this thing up in our culture, in the language we understand, so that we can also respond to them in our various capacities.
For us at Landway, we've always had this in mind, to how we design our projects. For instance, we have a project called Isimi Lagos, And from the design stage to how we're planning to execute the project, we factored in all the element of sustainability into it, because the city, there is reduction in the use of vehicles. You only have to use electric cars, solar cars, and all of that, and all the houses are supposed to be powered by solar, and then 70% transparent, and then 30% concrete to allow natural sunlight, and also we're retaining about 60% of the trees within the city, and in all the element of the design, this is factored into the development, and it's all about being deliberate about it and being concerned about the future, and not just about the now, not just about the transaction, but trying to do what is effective for the future.
The real estate sector recognizes that they're one of the biggest culprits when it comes to wrecking the environment in many ways. And it's good to see that there are mostly private sector institutions in the sector who are starting to think, talk, and act in terms of cleaning up the impact of the built industry on the environment. And clearly that takes more than just token activities. It takes a concerted effort in terms of industry-wide approach and industry-wide strategies and industry-wide benchmarks and performance metrics to make that really work. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely being championed by the private sector, but there's also a lot of developmental agency input to ensure that at the time when we're able to aggregate performance and check how we're doing, the metrics are the same or similar across board.
So, but then at what point, or would the government be required at some point down the line in terms of, putting out legislation to ensure that everyone is on the same page? You talked about monitoring and all of that. Yeah. Would that be required at some point?
Oh, most definitely. But I find that the most enduring of legislations actually come bottom up. It's almost pointless when they are legislated and then enforced, because then enforcement becomes a really big issue on its own. So I like the approach that we're taking, and that approach is that we recognize what the challenges are, and we are also the providers of the solutions for those challenges. So that's what makes this really exciting. I mean, ultimately, we ourselves would take the issues to government and say, this is how we believe that this should be addressed. And what government will then do, of course, is seek their own experts' opinion and bring their own expertise or experts to the table. We can then work together to make sure that the policies are actually not policies that are in a book, but policies that can actually be implemented.
How can the industry improve its efficiency and environmental impact through sustainable practices? Professor Obas Obahon sheds light into how responsible construction practices can protect surrounding ecosystem.
Sustainable culture is very, very important, because 75% of all the known factors responsible for environmental degradation globally are traceable to the built environment. So if you can sort the problems out within the built environment, then you've gone a long way to actually effecting the possible changes. If, according to Winston Churchill during the Second World War, he says it was an advice to designer, architects, and real estate. He says they should be very careful, because the product that they are producing lasts over hundreds of years. What you design today, the way you design the city today, will shape the way you live in it. So it's very, very important. And also, the built environment sector, in many respects, is an intensive consumer of raw materials. So in terms of wood, fuel, energy, CO2 emissions, because it contributes about 40% of total CO2 emissions globally. It consumes about 20% of clean water, right? And it consumes about 40% of total global energy. That is not taking into account what we call embodied energy. That is the energy used in manufacturing the product, transporting it to work. And once the process is completed, it still continues to consume energy, it still continues to consume natural resources in terms of maintaining it, and so on and so forth. So if you design a city too far away from every possible amenities, then people have to travel. If you design the environment very well and you put all the necessary facilities in, like schools, hospitals, all kinds of shops, people don't have to travel. If even they are traveling, they walk, and so that reduces the intensity in terms of raw material consumptions, and also the what we call the waste generated, drastically is reduced.
On to what Tolu said, in terms of artists has sort of put something out there where if you want to get finance, right, and it has to do with a building, they expect that that building is green. Now we're on this lovely stage with all the plants and so on. Does it qualify for the stage as green? Yes, it adds something to it, right, and makes it green. But what we say at the IFC is that you must be able to show me something, right, a certificate that says your building is green. And it's not IFC that gives you that certificate. We have partners that we work with who will be able to tell you your building has met certain standards for energy efficiency, for water efficiency, and for the materials that you use for your building. And once you're able to meet that, and in this case, you can even decide to go higher, like the previous presentation said. You can make it 40%. You can decide to go off-grid, like Hakeem said. And the more you do it, of course, the more you go towards net zero. So that's what we ask. We say that the building has to be third-party qualified. You have to meet the standards. Then after meeting the standards, we have to be able to show that your building is indeed meeting the standards. Once you do that, you can go to Tola and say, Tola, I have a green asset. Like Hassan said, that how do we qualify this asset? You must be able to show me something that says my asset is green. So once you're able to do that, I can go to Tola, I can go to Tolu and say, I have this green asset, I would like to qualify for financing. And not just financing, we're also talking about mortgages. If I buy a building that is green, I should be able to go to a finance house and say, I want a mortgage for this. It's a green building, and I want this lower interest rate on it. So the certificate qualifies you within the financial market to get better mortgage interest price, better financing, and so on. So we qualify it that way. Once the certifier is able to say, indeed, you have a green building, your certificate qualifies you to be able to face all these financial institutions.
Everybody now is talking about building greener buildings, less heavy buildings, using less materials. And if you look at the best practices in the world, everybody is shifting towards much lighter modular systems of building. And I think it's key so that we use less materials and we have a much more simpler and efficient way of building. So for us as Carmo, this is the mentality we think a lot of sub-Saharan African countries should adopt in their housing construction.
Well, tell us about how you are practicing that. And I know that you also, you have the IFC Edge, you're part of the IFC Edge portfolio, but help us understand how that works.
Okay, so the Edge is a methodology that allows you or wants you to have more efficient, let's say, water usage in the house. It wants you to have insulation that allows you to use less materials so the home stay cool. It wants even the way your windows, the size of your windows, in terms of how much light and energy you conserve in the house. Also, in terms of the lightness of the material, these are the kind of things that you have to look at when you're applying for Edge. So for us, we use cement boards to build. It makes you use way less cement because the factory already plasters the cement finished when it comes out. In our insulation, we use polystyrene, for example. This is a fire resistant and also an insulator. We apply a lot of solar energy in our buildings. Even our assembly line in Nigeria is totally off-grid. So these are the kind of things that we do, and we try to prove to the industry that is the way forward and the way to go.
I'm happy you mentioned that because I was going to ask you the extent of the buy-in. You know, when we're talking about sustainability, ESG within the built industry here in Nigeria, is there a broad buy-in? I mean, is there the issue of affordability? I mean, some of the materials you just talked about, are they affordable? Can developers adopt them, etc.?
So I would clarify, we don't see ourselves as a developer. We're a technology company. We provide services for developers. So in terms of acceptability, Nigeria has not started adopting modular systems. I would say 99% of our building method is still block work. So I think it will still take some time. You need a lot of more concerted effort to build a national system of innovation along the value chains. For us, our customers are quite clear in terms of our industry. We're servicing big projects. So if you think about oil and gas, you think about security industry, you think about big construction sites, think about railway projects. We build the camps for those kind of projects because we can deploy really quickly, and when the project is over, we can also demobilize the buildings. So our niche is to service the real estate industry and other industries. So in terms of the mass housing, in terms of the actual property development for people to live in, the government policy is not there yet. So we don't want to take unnecessary risk because we're in a mass housing, the margins are small, and a company like us, we only make profit when there's volume.
Now, some experts tell us that while we talk about ESG within the built environment, they also say that how some projects are even funded is also an issue and also a conversation that should be discussed. Talk to us about, shed more light on that for us, why the role of funding in the built environment is from a sustainability context.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to funding, I mean, now what a lot of investors are doing is making sure they tie their funding to ESG goals, right? Within the built environment, I mean, specifically talking about green buildings where my expertise is, there are lots of funding opportunities that are tied to just green. So, meaning that if your project is not green, you will not have access to this kind of funding. It's a way for the financial industry to steer buildings onto a greener path, and I think it's a good way. It's a good thing. But what we need to get a lot more of these funding out there. We need to make a lot more awareness because some developers do not even know about it. I'm sure if they all knew, people wouldn't even be thinking about doing conventional building. They would all be ensuring that their buildings have some sort of sustainability measures in there, right? So we need to do a lot more awareness in that regard.
Well, beyond awareness, is it even attractive, for these developers or builders in the first place, or are there incentives? And what else can we do to create more awareness? But first, around the issue of how attractive is it for a developer to approach an IFC, for instance, for a green, for funding for a green project?
So it's rather unattractive to not to build green because, I mean, take IFC for instance. If you want funding for any project and it's not green, I mean, you won't even have the opportunity to discuss it with us. IFC now only supports projects that are green. Unless there's no way that project can be green. But once it has 4 walls and has a roof, it is possible to put in sustainability measures in there. We used our certification program, which is called EDGE. It's very, very simple and easy, and we believe that if developers have any issues with any other certification system, at least they should be able to do EDGE. So it's one key thing. We are making it very easy and simple for developers to build green. So we don't see why a developer can say, I'm not able to certify my project, but then can still come to us for funding. That won't work.
So looking at your green portfolio, and are you able to tell us those countries or regions within the African continent that are, they're really bought into the idea and are embracing it? Where are you seeing the highest numbers?
So within Africa, we have projects everywhere. We've certified projects across Africa. Currently, as we speak, we have close to about 2 million square meters of certified floor space in Africa. That's for edge. When it comes to housing, we have close to 40,000 housing units that have been certified within Africa. So it's an idea that is coming up, and we've seen a lot of uptake in the past 8 months. And it's very interesting. I think it's coming on the back of COVID. People are now realizing the importance of making sure that buildings are resilient and efficient.
For the organizers of this summit, the key takeaway from the summit are to see more sustainable practice that is beneficial to present and future generations.
What we're trying to do at 3Invest and Unite Summit is for us to get the stakeholders in the industry to embrace this concept of sustainability, to understand it. So basically what we're doing is educating the industry more, increasing awareness of sustainability being a solution to most of the gaps in the industry. We believe that the industry has a lot of, responsibilities when it comes to climate crisis, seeing that the 40% of carbon emission is consumed by the built environment, starting from, so what we're doing as advocates is for, to increase that knowledge of, starting to build green, looking at your waste management, looking at your water management, looking at your how you use your energy, how you conserve energy, how you use your energy, looking at how the carbon emission works. We're obviously, especially in Nigeria, a generator-driven country because of the issue with power. But I also believe there are a lot of education around sustainability that will help us reduce the use of relying on generator, and that would also obviously help the crisis that we are facing when it comes to climate change.
Okay, briefly tell us about some of the conversations that have been had so far. I know there have been a number of keynote speakers who have spoken, but also just some key highlights for you, key takeaways for you so far.
Yeah, okay. It was a great event yesterday and today. I think we started with a very good key presentation from Professor Bonhon, who is also obviously a professor of environmental sustainability in the UK, and he talked about towards a sustainable culture, which was the theme of the event, and he was able to explain to us that sustainability is about the mindset. We all actually think sustainability cannot work, but decisions you take is what helps you become and achieve that goal of sustainability. We have conversations around sustainable building. We also learned about how the way we build, the way we design can actually affect, the way, we do things. We obviously also heard about sustainable finance. We talked about, the different types of incentives you can get when you're sustainable. We talked about access to green finance, to Coke's bonds that supports the fact that you're even a sustainable company or you're building, green, as the case may be. And so those are the round kind of conversations. We've had the leaders meeting, which is actually very well also engaging. When we talked about affordability versus sustainability, there was a debate around sustainability is expensive, it's not affordable, and we're talking about why tell us to go do something that that's not practical. But we also understood that there are actually steps to take, and if you take those steps, you now see that something you thought was expensive is just a mindset thing. So those are the key takeaway from the event this year.
It is important for Africa's built environment to embrace a more sustainable culture. This brings us to the end of this special edition of Focus On. I'm Akin Obake. Thank you for watching.